Rescue on Fractalus was the first LucasArts game to appear on the CoCo. How does it stack up to the Atari 8-bit port? It's the CoCo Show, episode 19. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoCo Show.
I'm
John.
Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're going to be talking about Rescue on Fractalus. Aaron, what is the most harrowing rescue operation you've ever been a part of?
Well, it's funny you should mention that boat, because I have been involved in a few rescue efforts. The one that comes to mind, I had a buddy named Neil, and he was dating a girl out the creek. I believe this creek in this particular instance may have been...
Out Turkey Creek?
No, I think it was like Cow Creek. It's one of these creeks. They're all the same.
Cow Creek's pretty high up on the list of creeks, though. I mean, that's a pretty high-class creek.
Correct. And so he was dating this chick who had a real militant mom. Right? This is high school days. I'm the guy with the license, you know.
Right.
So he says, listen, he goes, we're going to go pick my girlfriend up at the house. She's got to get out of there. I'm like, okay, man. But he goes, listen, her mom won't let her leave. And so she's going to pull this bit where she climbs out the window. You know, that old trick. I'm like, okay. So he goes, so when you get up there, cruise your car in with the engine off. No problem. I've used that plenty of times to come home. You know, that shtick. Turn the lights off, turn the engine off, coast into the driveway. It's a done deal. So we get there, turn the lights off, turn the engine off, coast in, and I've got a dude with me. So it's a dual effort. So Neil
two-man operation.
Neil jumps out. He goes over. He goes to the chick's window, and I see her start wiggling. You know, the window opens, and she starts wiggling out the window. And he's, you know, trying to help her down. So while this is happening, the front door opens, and the mom walks out and stands like with her arms on her sides, right behind Neil. And Neil's oblivious. I think he was drunk. And she's just standing there. She's not saying nothing. And so Neil is still trying to help this chick out. And I'm like, oh my God. So I rolled my window down. I go, Neil, look behind you. And he turned around dopily and looked, and he saw the mom there. And so then he starts trying to shove the chick back in. And she doesn't know what's happening. She's still trying to get out. So she's wiggling, and he's shoving. And finally, he just gets to the old heave-ho, shoots her across the room. She disappears. Neil drunkenly staggers to the car and jumps in. And then we got the heck out of there. So yeah, that's the one I would say. I kind of rescued somebody there. What about you?
Probably. I don't know that I've ever rescued anyone. I think that getting married rescued me from a life of drunken debauchery.
It did?
Well, maybe half of that. There's always a story about. I remember there was one time you rescued Teresa on Mud Mountain when her car almost went over the side of the mountain.
That's true. Mud Mountain was notoriously steep and slick in the ice and snow. And she called me on the phone weeping. She's like, man, I can't get off the hill. I'm going to fall to my death. And Mud Mountain is right beside the interstate. So I was on the interstate at the time, and I looked over, and I could see her car teetering off the cliff. So I drove as quick as I could down there, parked my Jeep, ran up the hill, helped her get out of the car, hopped in it, and I did finally get it to the top of the hill because I had a little more skill in the Mud Mountain driving abilities to get it up there. But yeah, many people have fallen off the mountain, including myself. So yeah, it was a dangerous proposition. Probably better for my health to have gotten the heck off there.
Yeah. I don't have any great stories like that. Most of the time, people rescue me. I don't do any rescuing.
There you go. Well, I'll keep that in mind. I'm waiting for that phone call now.
All right, Aaron, let's talk about Rescue on Fractalus.
Yes, Rescue on Fractalus. Now, Boat, this game has a rep, right? And I know you're an old Atari guy, an old 8-bit guy. Had you came across this one before?
Oh yeah. This is a game that I played. I didn't play it when I had my first go round with the Atari. I'd never heard of it, but when I got back into the retro scene and back into the Atari 8-bit, this was one that everybody's like, you need to play Rescue on Fractalus. I can see why. It's very unique. Of course, it being part of that smallish group of titles that made its debut on the Atari 8-bits rather than the Apple II or the C64, and then ported everywhere else from there.
I first played this on the Atari myself back in the day. It's funny, we were talking before the show. When this game was in production, the working title at the time was called Behind Jaggy Lines. And I distinctly remember playing Behind Jaggy Lines. And so I would speculate that maybe there was a leak, or maybe some versions of that game with that title got out. Because I remember playing a game called that. Although Rescue on Fractalus is a better name, needless to say. But yeah, I'd played this back in the day too. It's funny, I had not played this on the CoCo very often at all. I did have it back when I had the CoCo 3, but I don't remember booting it up that much, because I remember basically I didn't have the documentation as usual, and so I didn't know what the buttons did. So this is the first time I've really known what was going on. So let's get into it here. Rescue on Fractalus, of course, it was developed by Lucasfilm Games. They did a lot of great stuff, but on the CoCo, they did this and Cronus Rift. This came out on the CoCo in '87. It came out on everything else around '84. This got released on several platforms. Some of these both we're going to try, by the way, as I look over this list. This got released on the Atari 8-bits, of course, an Atari 5200 port, the Amstrad CPC. I'd like to see what that looks like, frankly. The Apple II, the C64, and the ZX Spectrum, which I didn't expect to see that on there either, Bode. So we may have to give that one a whirl. The CoCo version requires 128K of memory. It's only on disk, and you have to have this runs out of OS 9 Level 2 or the Nitro OS 9, Nitro OS. That's the sort of the newish, the hot new thing, which is the way I played it, by the way. And it requires a joystick. Now, of course, published by Epix through Radio Shack, as everything was. So, what do you do in this crazy game? There's actually, if you look at the manual, there's a pretty comprehensive backstory to this thing. Basically, you've got pilots that have crashed on this planet. And the planet's atmosphere is acidic, okay? This is a short version. And so your job is to go onto the planet and land and rescue these pilots without getting shot by the various gun stations on the planet. And eventually you'll even run into enemy fighters and whatnot. And you've got to land, and you've got to get the pilots into your ship. And when you rescue all the pilots, you can leave and go back and dock with the mothership and then go to the next level. The funny thing is, all these pilots, they've crash landed in their ship, so they're okay in their ship. But when you land, they have to emerge from their ship and run to your ship. And as they do that, they're slowly, basically melting because of the atmosphere. It's an acidic atmosphere.
Right.
So if you don't open the door for them quick enough, they can literally die at the door. At the door, they would melt horribly. So it's. I mean, I think that's a really cool plot. I mean.
It's an excellent plot for a video game. Who doesn't want to swoop in, land on a foreign planet, pick up a guy that's running towards you, and then blast off again? I mean, that's like the ultimate Star Wars
and the
fantasy.
bad guys in this are the Jaggies, which I think that's a cute code name, because we all know what Jaggies are.
Yeah.
And they actually, in the manual, they go into what the Jaggies are, like the Jaggies are. They also go into what kind of ship you're running. There's a lot of, there's a whole page of like a picture of your ship and all the stats and stuff on it. The manual is pretty cool for this. It actually gives you a lot of help too, because this game for a title of this era was incredibly advanced. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So the graphics on this were something that really you hadn't really seen before. Boat. Had you ever seen it? I mean, when you first saw this, what was your impressions back in the day?
Well, like I said, I didn't play this back in the day, but when I played it for the first time, coming back to it, I was floored because I just didn't think the graphics like this were possible on the Atari 8-bit machines. I mean, the smoothness at which the terrain passes by under you was incredible, and the amount of detail. Now, when we talk about the amount of detail, I mean, we're talking about shapes and lines and colors. It's not like you're seeing like alien cities below you or anything like that. But just the illusion of the landscape is very complete, even though it's simple.
I mean, this is one of those games, and thankfully you're watching the video of this, but if you're not, please go check out a video, because it's hard to explain graphically what it is, and it's even harder to explain how it fit into the timeline of computers back in the day. This is the kind of terrain that just simply was never seen. You get the feeling that you are flying a ship over an alien landscape.
Well, and it's interesting too. I was reading an article in an episode of Atari. It was, I think, Atari Computer User magazine. I got the Slow Norris sent us a bunch of these magazines, and I'm still reading them. And they were talking about how when they first came up with the concept of this game, everybody at Atari said they were crazy. They said there's no possible way that you can do a first-person space flight game with 3D terrain and make it run anywhere close to fast enough where it would be fun. And they said, "Oh yeah,
yeah."
And they made
I
it,
agree.
So.
Now I will say I want to get into the fact that this on the CoCo version of this game, they did an excellent job. The author of this was a guy named Ken Rogaway, and he did a tremendous job. It's funny, our own L. Curtis Boy, our good buddy, actually mentioned in our Discord that this game is in assembly. It says here that Ken Rogaway ported it in 6 weeks, converting the 6502 assembly code to the 6809, and which he'd never seen before. And also he mentioned that it was about 90% conversion from the 6502 and 10% doing the 6809. He did it all under the OS 9 operating system, which he'd also never used. So he was literally walking out into uncharted territory here when he was converting this over. And also it was mentioned that when Coronis Rift was done, this conversion was much easier because now they had an idea of what they were doing. So you can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into Ken Rogaway a little bit. He has a pretty decent resume here. He started game programming in '82 for an outfit called Creative Software. So check out some of the stuff he worked on, Boat. He worked on the PC version of California Games. He worked on, like I said, Rescue of Fractalus and Coronis Rift on the CoCo. He did World Games and Winter Games on the Apple IIe. Amongst the other things he worked on over his career, he did Blood Rain 2, Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, Ghostbusters on the PC, the newer one.
So he continues on into the modern era.
He has retired now, from what I read, but yeah, he did a lot of stuff. So, with all that said, let's get into the meat of the game here. Like we said, you come down, you start sort of almost like a warp speed. You come out of warp over Fractalus. I should say that Fractalus is actually named because of the fractal technology they used to create the landscape, which again, this was something that I don't know if it had ever been used in a game. I don't remember ever seeing it before. And I'd seen it used after this quite a bit, but not before it. So I think this is probably paving the way. You come out of orbit into the planet, and then you have to go around using your radar to try to find these downed ships. They'll come up on your radar, and actually the radar system's kind of twofold in this boat. It's a pretty intricate control setup, isn't it, Boat, on this thing?
You know, it's funny. We fault games all the time for having big HUDs on the screen that take up half the screen. This is the exception. This is the huge HUD where every single thing on there is useful.
You stole my line. That's exactly right. This may be the only time I've ever seen one of these things where every single thing in your control panel has a legitimate purpose that you need to know. You know, everything from your horizon indicator, the two different types of radar, your thrust, if your airlock's open, if you're powered down, if you're powered up, like how much space you have on the sides, a compass. It's got all this stuff, and you need every bit of it. I mean, let me rephrase that. You don't need it. You don't need all of it, but it helps. Like any
and it's
ship
functional.
Would have
it's not.
that.
It's not just like a picture of your pilot, you know, or something dumb like that. Like even if everything you don't need 100% of the time, it looks like you're inside the cockpit of a plane and everything is functional, and that adds to the immersive experience. Again, this is just the immersive quality of this game can't be overstated.
Yeah, it really. I mean, this game is light years ahead of the competition of this type back in the day. So, as you descend into the rocky terrain of Fractalus, you will encounter jaggy like encampments, basically, where they can shoot at you. And the shots come out from up on the hills, and they look awesome on the lower levels. Eventually, they'll even dispatch a craft that can come hit you. It can come at you, which is cool. But the most of the time, you're going to encounter the shots coming from the hills, and they look awesome. Like the rendering of the shots, they look like what shots would look like if you saw them off in the distance, don't they, Boat?
Yes.
I mean, it's quite amazing.
I still don't exactly know how they.
I don't either.
To tell you the truth,
and I can't describe what it looks like. It just works.
but it looks real.
Yeah, and when you shoot back, that looks real too. And you can actually hit this stuff because the targeting in this is not. You don't have to be exact. You know, you have to be close. You know, and that will get you there. So once you've navigated your way down to the planet surface, you're going to start looking for your pilots. Now you've got a little radar range on the right-hand side of your control panel that's like almost looks like a down arrow, and you'll see dots come on that, and they'll outline enemies or down ships. And then you can use that to get an approximation of where you want to land, and then you can use the forward radar, which is dead center, that has a crosshair on it with a blown up, almost like it's like a TV monitor, and then you can use that to show you exactly where the ships are. When you've determined where you need to land. You have to go over and you just hit basically the L button and it will land, assuming you're not too high. But that's not all you have to do, is it, Boat?
You've got there's a procedure that you have to follow.
Yes, there is. You have to power down.
And this is part of the fun of the game, is because you're pretending. I mean, again, you're in the cockpit of this thing, so you land, okay, and then you've got to turn. You've got to power down. You got to turn your systems off. And then you've got to open up that airlock. So the pilot that's running towards you. And then when you open the airlock, you hear the pilot run towards you. Now, we can talk about the actual realism of having sound in a vacuum. You know, we don't know what the atmosphere is like. Who cares? You hear the pitter patter of quiet feet come towards you. You hear the pilot, jump in, and then you close the airlock. You turn on your systems and you blast off.
From what I read in the manual, the reason you have to turn your systems off is because that effectively is turning off a shield that surrounds your ship. The neat thing is, depending on how you land, if you land, for example, with the down ship in front of you, you can see the down ship and you'll see the pilot come out and run towards your ship. It's awesome.
Another super impressive thing where the level of realism for the time where you see it's like the sprite gets bigger as he comes towards you. Super awesome. And what's great too is that when you land away from the ship, you don't see any of that stuff. The game is pretty forgiving in terms of you don't have to land right on top the ship to be in range. And the game tells you if he's in range, it says right up at the top, pilot in range. If he's not in range, then you've got to get closer. So I found that to be very, very good, because the game's designers, they wanted you to succeed. They didn't want to punish you. And, the game definitely gets more difficult on the later levels, but that part of the game, the landing, the getting the pilots, they made it very
forgiving. And the thing is, you wouldn't, if this was real, you wouldn't necessarily land where you could see the pilot as long as he was in range, and the sound effects get you there, and it works great. Right. Something else you can do is off-the-wall things. For example, you can land without powering your shields off, and you could just blast the pilot. You can shoot his ship. You can not open the airlock, and he'll knock. They'll knock faster. They'll knock slower, and then presumably he dies out there.
He dies. The acid gets him,
You can kill the pilot. You can shoot the downed pilot. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. As you get onto the higher levels of this, and I thought this was real neat, Bo, because I knew this was in the game, but I didn't know the full backstory on this. When you get into the game later on, you will land, and sometimes a pilot will come out, and they'll look a little different, right? And what it is, it's a Jaggy in disguise. And he will come up and start smashing your window, basically. And you have to turn your systems on and take off, or he'll kill you right there on the spot. And I can tell you, when this happened the first time to us, the first time I saw that was on the Atari back in the day. But when the first time that happened, we about jumped out of our socks. I mean, it really did scare the crap out of us. And I was reading the docs for this and the wiki, and it said that George Lucas suggested that. He was like, yeah, you should.
Oh, the jump scare.
You should put this in. It'll be funny. And they didn't document it or talk about it in any of their advertising at all. They didn't want anyone to know about it. So there were people, much like myself, of course, I pirated this, but who had no idea that could happen. Something else we need to touch on is the fact that you've got a day and night cycle on this. And that does drastically affect the way how you can pilot around, because you can easily careen into these mountains and stuff if you're not paying attention, or if you're going too fast. Of course, you can adjust your own thrust to accommodate for how fast you want to go through these cliffs. But I mean, there is a lot of stuff going on here. I did not get super high. How high up the level chain did you attempt, Bode? Because you do get the pick.
I started at level 4. I didn't go back to level 1.
I went to level 1 to start. I didn't have. So okay. What was it like at level 4, Bode?
There's from what I could tell, because I went back to level 1, there's more stuff that shoots at you, and there's more pilots to rescue. So it's the game didn't seem to give you any harder, other than the fact that you had to defend yourself against more bad guys.
Yeah. It's funny because when the Jaggies come up to trick you, at first they have I believe it's a different colored helmet, but eventually they look exactly like a pilot. I read, and so you have to throw your shields on real quick. I've never seen this, but I read that they could actually, if you open the airlock, they'll come in your ship and start wrecking it. I don't know what I've never seen that, but I read that. So I don't know if that's something you have to try on your own. I've never personally seen it. I can't gush enough about this one though. Now, let's talk about some of the shortcomings, Boat. Does this run at breakneck speed? No, it is not. If you're used to a modern flight simulator, this is not going to be your bag, because it runs along at a dismal frame rate, despite the fact that it was the best that you could get out of these machines at the time. I made up a little comparison here, Boatster, between the Atari 5200 version, which is effectively the 8-bit version of the Atari, and the CoCo 3 version. You can see that, first of all, you can see that they did a lot of work in the couple years they had extra on the Radio Shack version to make the control panel look a lot cooler, and the mountains look more detailed. Yeah. But you can see that the Atari 5200 version of this is whipping along at a slightly better frame rate. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the speed is the big difference. If you play the Atari, I didn't play the 5200 version. I played the Atari 8-bit version, but I played back to back with the CoCo version, and the speed is the big difference. The cockpit looks best on the CoCo 3 of all the different versions that I looked at. The colors and everything look the best. But the speed, and the speed is everything in a game like this. Now, there is funny. Picard mentioned a game called Infiltrator. Have you ever played a game called Infiltrator before?
I don't know. The name rings a bell, but I can't say here and say with certainty that I have.
This Infiltrator is a game that borrows a lot from Rescue on Fractalus. You start the game piloting a helicopter, and you have to land in various places, and then it turns into a game more like an adventure game, like a third-person adventure game, where you have to go into different places on a base, and you have to shuffle through documents and stuff like that. Then you blast off again. So I would call it kind of the spiritual successor to Rescue on Fractalus. If you're looking to play another game in that genre, check out Infiltrator. I'm sure it came out on the C64. I played it on the
It's funny you should mention that, Bo, because there was a sequel planned for this game. First of all, there were several versions of this game that were made and never got released. There was an unreleased 7800 version, Atari 7800. It was found in 2004. And most of the core elements of the game was intact, but it had been canceled at some point. Now get this, Bo, this hits so close to home for us. LucasArts and Factor 5, you may have heard of them, they began working on a sequel titled Return to Fractalus on the Amiga in the late 80s.
Oh.
But they decided that the hardware couldn't handle it. So they decided to do a port of Rescue on Fractalus. Rainbow Arts was going to do that. We know them. I believe they were behind the Turrican series.
Turrican.
In February 91, they mentioned it in the One magazine, but it was never released. By that time, they probably saw the ship was sinking. So in 95 or 94, Factor 5 thought that the current generation of consoles could handle that sequel they wanted to make, and they started working on it, but eventually they turned it into what ended up being Star Wars Rogue Squadron on the N64.
Oh, yeah.
Something else.
What a story.
Here's something else I didn't know. When they started making Rescue on Fractalus, they decided that they wanted it to be based in the Star Wars universe. And Lucas was like, nah. Not doing that. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about here before we put this to bed. Our own L. Curtis Boyle is a renowned CoCo master, and he's been converting a lot of these older games, old CoCo games, over to run on the 6309 processor, which is a real simple upgrade you can do to your Color Computer 3. And so he put together a video that I horked, and I'm going to show it to you now. On the left side, you see a standard CoCo 3 version of this, and on the right side, you see the enhanced 6309 version. Curtis, I believe, completely disassembled the code for this game and put in his speed ups, and you could tell right away there is an unbelievable difference.
It's a night and day difference in terms of the speed. For
Curtis
sure.
also tells me that the 6309 works with the CoCo 1 and 2 as well. The speed difference in this is off the charts. Off the charts. I mean, it's a much better game.
It's really the best of both worlds because you get the speed of the Atari 8-bit port plus the resolution of the CoCo 3. It's the best way to play the game.
Because the CoCo really its version is superior to all the other versions except for the speed. And when you add that, it's go time.
And Curtis did want us to mention that if you download the latest version of Nitros 9, the EOU edition, it comes with this game pre-installed. So if you've got a CoCo 3 and you've got that processor upgrade, you can check this out right away. And
that's exactly how I played it. I mean, that could be a whole show in itself. But Nitros 9 is great. But yeah, this is outstanding. Curtis has put a lot of these speed ups in a ton of games. But I mean, I think this might be, and Curtis is in here, he can correct me. This has got to be the most dramatic difference that speed up has made. So if you've got a CoCo 3, I strongly suggest thinking about having that processor upgrade. It's a real simple upgrade. I did mine myself. And it also relieves a lot of heat in your system, and it takes a lot of strain off the power supply as well. So it's a good, easy upgrade all around, Boatster, that I recommend.
Yeah. I'm going to be checking this out on the Mister. I've just got a Mister, and there is a CoCo 3 core that is available, and I'm going to be getting that and checking it out.
Did we get any Discord action on this boat?
Let me check. I gotta see. Well, yes, we did. We got a review from one L. Curtis Boyle himself, and he writes, "This was a groundbreaker of a game when it came out on other platforms, using innovative techniques using fractal math to convert a simple 16 by 16 grid of heights and depths into realistic mountainscapes, especially given the limits of doing this on 8-bit systems. The original CoCo 3 version came out a couple years after the other 8-bit versions, and it shows in the graphics are enhanced with more detail on the console and a much better pilot running animation. The game's fun and adds new challenges as you progress through levels. The only bad thing is that after you've mastered the game, the difficulty increases stop after a certain level. The CoCo version's sound is minimal too. I give it a 7.5 out of 10 or an 8 for my speed improved versions, particularly for the 6309. I would bump that up to a 9, Curtis, with your inclusions.
I agree.
There.
By the way, I did take the chance to look this up on eBay, Boat. You can get this complete in box. $50 or best offer that's up there right now. I saw one up for $25, but the box was in rough shape, and you can get one with just the disc and the manual for $15 bills, Boaster.
Awesome. All right. Well, as we cruise on to the end of the show, we do want to thank all the fine folks that make the CoCo Show possible. I'm talking about our Patreon supporters. You can head on over to patreon.com/the CoCo Show, and you can support the show either at the $4 or $10 a month level. We want to thank our CoCo Show supporters, Steve Rasmussen and Buttons, and we want to give a big shout out to our CoCo superstar, William Becker. Thank you guys so much for supporting the CoCo Show. We record the CoCo Show live on twitch.tv/Amigos Retro Gaming. So if you're not subscribed to our Twitch channel, make sure you give us a follow, and you can be notified whenever we record. And we've also got a group of fine folks that have joined us in the chat. So we thank all of the fine folks that are in the chat right now that are watching the show live. Thank you for being here. And we will be back next time with another new edition of the CoCo Show. Aaron, there's only one more thing to say, and that's all hail
L. Curtis Boyle.